Hello and welcome. This is Abigail Perella with Sparkle and Shine Guidance, and today we are talking all about Saturn in Aries. For the next 2.5 years, we're going to be dealing with this energy. It is a huge transformation. I do want to note that although I'm going to be focused on Saturn in Aries, there are some other transits happening that are connected, of course, to the Saturn in Aries transition. And one of the things that I want to notice is that we're moving into a time where we're moving into like the base energies of Aries. And then we have some other planets transitioning into the earlier signs as well. And so when we're thinking about these early signs, they work with the base energies and they give us this opportunity to rework with our base energies and our foundation and our early years and the formation of our beliefs and our patterning. So it's a very powerful time to work together. It's a very powerful time to do the inner work. And okay, so let's start with what Saturn is all about. Saturn, moves into a new sign every 2.5 years. We'll go through a retrograde period. And during this particular transit, we're going to have this dipping in to Saturn in Aries that will then dip out as we move into the fall. So when Saturn goes retrograde, it will dip back into Pisces and it'll be a little reprieve from all this new energy. And then it'll come back into Saturn and Aries in February. And at that point, it comes on like full force. So the initiation is going to be intense of this energy because it's starting off a whole new cycle of Saturn and starting off a whole new cycle in the zodiac. And when Saturn moves into this like 0 degree, first degree point of Aries, it hits kind of this spring equinox point, like this very cardinal new beginning point. And we really want to exemplify that in our lives, make the right choices in our lives. And I'm going to talk more about kind of the energies of this particular transit. But Saturn itself has to do with responsibility, it has to do with maturity and learning from our mistakes and lessons that take time and take mistakes and take learning new ways of doing things in order to grow and flourish and see the results. It's very much a slow process. It takes time, it takes maturity. The Saturn return doesn't happen until we're like 28 to 29 years old. It takes time. It takes time to see these lessons and see what's forming in your life, what's crystallizing in your life. And one of the things that I love to do as an astrologer is we'll go through the Saturn cycles in your life, and there's always lessons. And of course, the older a client is, the more that's there to be harvested and gathered and like used, worked with, and like there's such appreciation for these like this life path, even with the pain, even with the suffering, even with the hard, harsh lessons that Saturn gives us. Saturn is very much like the patriarchal father, harsh disciplinary energy in our chart. And there is, if you have more Saturnian energy in your chart, or Saturn is really occupying like a major space in your chart, like the top of your chart or at your rising, somewhere really significant, you can feel that internal pressure. You can feel that heaviness within you. And this can also be true when you're having a Saturn transit. So we'll talk about that more. But Saturn in itself is a social planet. It is what we say, like the seventh planet. And as they kind of expand out, they have to do with more of your social group. And, Jupiter and Saturn are both social planets, but Saturn has to do more with this very specific 2.5 year cycle. And this, it's not just like, I don't know how to explain it actually. Like I'm thinking about it and I'm thinking about like how I think of Jupiter as like the class you graduated with, whereas Saturn is more of like the social, but like the social disciplines of that time. So there's very specific time cycles of Saturn in a certain sign that show the characteristics of that type of being, that how it flavors that generation. It's not a generation either, but like that group subset of people. So when we're looking at the last times that like Saturn was in certain signs, it'll make more sense because you'll see that this patterning that happens with Saturn that really imprints and crystallizes and forms a lot of thinking and belief. And so, and also like discipline and ways in which we do things. So I'll talk more about that as we move into like the specifics with this um, Saturn and Aries energy because you'll start to see, and I'll explain it more. So yeah, Saturn is a really important thing to look at in your birth chart. And it's also where we have a lot of pride. Like we can have a lot of pride because we've had a lot of harsh lessons. And oftentimes the things that we're most proud of are the things that we've worked the hardest for. They're not the things that have come super easy to us. They're not the things that we just are like accustomed to or we're born with. These are the things that we hustle for, we work for, we've put in our blood, sweat, and tears for this, and to see the fruition of that, it gives a different kind of pride. um so yes, so that's Saturn. Okay, and then we have Aries energy, which Aries is kind of the opposite, which is why we say that Saturn is in its fall in Aries. Aries is youthfulness, it is a spark, it is this like quick, I see it, I want it, I got it, amazing. There is definitely, there's some work involved in Aries energy for sure, but it is a quick spurt. It is a spark. It is like just the beginnings. So when we have a planet like Saturn in Aries, it's in its fall because one, it's exalted in Libra, which if you think about Libra and its relationship to the sun, and the sun is also that like youthful energy. When we think about Libra, it's on the opposite side. So like if you look at the charts where Libra occupies is the seventh house, which is the descendant. It's the opposite side of the sun, which makes sense why Saturn loves being there, is exalted there because Saturn is like that dark depth, old age, like maturity, and it's like the opposite of the sun. And so when we think of Aries, Aries is like very connected to the sun, very connected because it's a fire sign, and Aries is that opposite side of the chart where the sun rises. It's like the beginning, it's fresh. And so Saturn is in its fall in Aries, and because of that, we can have um, both the strengthening of Aries things, but also at the same side of the coin, when we lean too hard into those Aries energies of just like, oh, all of a sudden I'm doing this and I think it's going to be successful. Saturn comes in and is like, you fall from grace harder, quicker because it's in its fall there. So it's like, yes, some things do come easier during Saturn and Aries because Saturn is in its fall, so not as strong, but the lasting power isn't there. And I'm going to give examples of this moving forward, that will make a lot more sense when you see past transits of this. Okay, so Aries is cardinal, fresh starts, the beginning, childhood. It's like, boom, I want it. I'm going after it. It's the masculine, like Mars energy, just going after it. And Saturn is more of like the slow, hard-earned wisdom. So Saturn is very self-motivated, very powerful energy. It rules the head, it rules aggression, these kinds of things. And Saturn is the slower burn. So this is a lot of what we're going to see with this Saturn and Aries energy is like where we need to establish a slower burn, where we can't just be chasing our passions, we can't just be chasing our vices. We have to really establish some serious inner discipline. Um, and I'm going to talk more about like if your Saturn is in Aries, what you might notice about that. But for now, I just want to say like this Saturn and Aries energy, we have to be cautious. We have to move a little slower around things, around the way we think and our ideas and putting our ideas into motion. This also because Aries rules the head. Um, And because Saturn is about our bones and our structures, we want to be cautious about, taking care of our minds, taking care of our heads, noticing like we've never been more on screens as we are now, and really noticing that and creating some inner discipline about those things, because it does affect our thinking, it does affect our mind, and it's something to really pay attention to as Saturn moves into Aries. Okay, so overall, we're going to talk about these next 2.5 years with Saturn in Aries, and this is a really high intensity time. Saturn in Aries is very active, very quick. And some of that, like I said, is good. And we do need to like make changes and work on our restructure our base energies, our inner like child, working on our beliefs, working on self-limiting beliefs, our confidence, our bravery, moving from a place of like trusting ourselves. And there are going to be a lot of tests around this, and a lot of tests around your bravery, your commitment to yourself, your commitment to your truth. And with Saturn and Aries, well, let me just say, Saturn in Pisces was a lot about maybe getting a little lost around certain beliefs and certain views on things. There's a lot of wacky kind of things out there right now. And I think that as we move into Saturn and Aries, a lot of that gets disciplined and honed. But then because of that honing, you really have to check yourself around like how far you've gotten from your like stability in your center and what you know to be true, and like that base energy of like who you truly are and what you're truly here for. This is also time for ego checks. This is a huge ego check time. There's also an energy with Saturn and Aries, kind of what I think of as like this really hot-headed, angry, daddy, strict disciplinary, which can create a lot of rebellion. And again, I'm going to talk about different transits of Saturn and Aries, which is going to make that make more sense. But checking your own temper, checking the way you're talking to those that are younger, obviously if you're a parent, but like also if you work with kids, like checking the way that you're interacting and utilizing your power, because Saturn and Aries will check you. And yeah, so Saturn and Aries, I think of as that hot-headed disciplinary. And then there can also be like issues with um, war, issues with having to go off to war, issues with a lack of father figures because of a war. And it doesn't have to be like what we think of as a war, but some type of energy that's keeping or holding back that patriarchal figure in your life. And then within yourself, like that inner disciplinary, that inner father figure within yourself, and checking where you've been not really checking in with that part of yourself, or where you've been distancing yourself because of X, Y, and Z. And this is really interesting because the card that I pulled for this transit for everyone, one is intensity. We got that. And then two is the Scorpion card, which is all about not falling prey to your own vices, not letting the poison you. It's like, that like homeopathic doses, like where are you overusing your medicines? Where are you overusing things that you're like utilizing to get through or to be happy, but like inevitably you don't have discipline around the thing, and that's what's causing the problem. It's like, what is that saying? Like everything in moderation, right? Like, so if there's something that's not in moderation in your life, um, if something that you need, you have to have, this is the time to really work on maybe shifting that, maybe learning some discipline around that thing. And yeah, there's also like with that card and with the energy of that and thinking about Saturn and Aries, there's also something about really coming back to your truest self, and the obstacles to that, like where is that true self of yours living, and what are the barriers that you have created in your life from her, him, they, you know. Okay, so I'm just looking at my notes. Okay, Yeah, okay. I think I'm ready to talk about other transits too. Yep. Other transits that we're going to be experiencing while Saturn is in Aries. So this first time, so we're talking about May 24th today, to September 1st is the first transit, and then we'll fall back into Saturn in Pisces, and then February 13th, 2026, we move back into Saturn in Aries until April 12th, 2028, which at that point, that's going to be a whole, I almost see it as like a whole different world, a whole different reality. So, right now, I'm going to talk to you about the transits that are big that are happening just this summer. Well, even a little bit before the summer. I'm going to be creating a couple more videos because we have a couple more big transits happening. One is Jupiter moving into Cancer next month, and then the following month, Uranus moves into Gemini. So when I'm talking about these base energies, we're looking at these very like societal and social planets moving into like these very base energies. When we think about the chart, it's like the bottom part of the chart that is very much about our foundation. And so we're really going to be working with our foundation in a massive way. Um, the first, I didn't bring any water in here, so smart. Okay, the first time that Saturn will have a transit is going to be squaring Jupiter on June 15th. And that square to Jupiter is going to be this first time that Saturn and Jupiter have a connection after that great conjunction of 2020. It happened in December 2020. I don't know if you remember, but it was big. It was really, really big. I remember I was in Florida and I got vertigo, and it was like I could tell it was totally related to this transit. And so this square energy, this is the first square that we're having with Saturn and Jupiter on June 15th, and it's going to be really confrontational. So if you think back to that 2020 time, you'll notice some themes possibly, and then you'll look at where Saturn and Jupiter are in your chart. And we're going to talk about that more because we're going to talk about where Saturn's going to be moving through your chart. And then also in my other video, we'll talk about where Jupiter's going to be moving through your chart in Cancer. So yeah, that's really big and it's coming really soon. And then in August 11th, we have Uranus sextiling Saturn, and that's also pretty big. So Uranus and Gemini is just going to be really big. So all of it is big. Then we move into Saturn square the North Node. Oh, that's not for a long ways. That's 2028. Okay, I miss my notes are kind of jumbled here. Okay, so those first two transits are really big. And then we don't have another one until Neptune meets Saturn in a conjunction on February 2026. If you haven't heard about that conjunction, it's very big. It's very, very big. It's like the biggest. Neptune is like the biggest, right? In terms of like expansion of the mind and all that. So having that conjunction next year is going to be very massive. And I will talk more about that in a separate video. But those are the things that are big that are going to be happening. And of course, squaring the nodes not until April 15th, 2028. Okay. So let's talk about the last time that Saturn was in Aries. The last time that Saturn was in Aries, if you're old enough, think back to the year was 1996. 1996 with a little break and during, I think it was 1998. Yep. And then back in. So from 1996 till 1999 with a little reprieve there in there somewhere. We had the Saturn and Aries energy. And now I made a whole list of all the different types of things that were happening during that time. I'm not going to share all of those with you, but there were a lot of explosions, issues with guns. There was a lot of explosive energy with the weather. There was a lot of shocking themes of violence within sports. There was, that was when the World Cup stampede, the bomb at the Atlantic Olympics, like what? It was just a lot going on around sports. There were also a rise in star athletes like Kobe Bryant and Tiger Woods and the Williams sisters, Venus. Wait, am I saying that right? Oh my gosh. Yeah, Venus and Serena Williams. And then David Beckham scored from the halfway line. I mean, people were blowing people's minds, right? Athletes were blowing people's minds. It also was around the time of famous figures dying before their time. Princess Diana died the same year that she called for an international ban on landmines, which is really interesting considering that we're talking about explosions, we're talking about this Saturn and Aries energy. She calls for an international ban on landmines, and then she gets in a car accident, a sudden car accident out of nowhere, and dies tragically that same year. Tupac and Biggie were shot and murdered, which was a huge deal. That was also the rise of, you guessed it, this shadowy figure, P. Diddy, came into like totally just like rising from the ashes of Biggie, like rode his coattails into famedom. And then all the lessons there. When I talked about earlier, I talked about like power and like coming back to your center. And with this energy of Saturn and Aries, as I was saying, with like the like angry father energy, there can be the misuse of power, there can be abusive situations. And I mean, when you think of Hollywood in general, during that time, it was like just the rise of like so much unhinged energy during that time. There was a lot of over sexualization of like the younger girls, which was always a thing, but just everything got bigger during that time because that's when we had online started becoming a thing, and we had like MTV everywhere showing these like really scandalous videos and things like that. Like I think of like Britney Spears like coming out in high school, and you're just like, okay, this is like really an over sexualization of high school students, right? So it's like just a lot of misuse of power and the rise of like Hollywood shade and like just sketchy things like that were always happening, but it just seemed like during that time there was not a lot of checks and balances. And it's not till like this transit again that a lot of like retribution is happening around those things and is going to continue to happen around just misuse of power. Also, during that time, Bill Clinton was reelected, and then his impeachment. And then, if you can remember, like all the things that he was famous for saying, like, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. And then also, like, about smoking weed that he smoke, but he didn't inhale. Like there was just a lot of spotlight on him and on things that he was saying as like the paternal figure for America during that time, and people being really disappointed. And if you look at where we are politically now, it's kind of like makes me scratch my head. Like I'm just like, wow, it's just such an interesting world, and I'm really intrigued to see what this next transit brings. But yeah, so the last time that Saturn was in Aries was during those late 90s. Man, a lot was shifting and changing, and there was a lot of counterculture happening then. Well, the 90s was like the grunge and like all of that was happening in the 90s. And then the time before that, that Saturn was in Aries was 1967 to 69. So if you think about the rebellious spirit of the youth then, flower power and the summer of love. It's like all of those things were happening, and it was the younger generation that was really like rebelling and pushing away. And I think of like there's so much of this energy in the late 90s too. If you think about like Rage Against the Machine, like I remember loving them, and like out of Seattle, there was just a lot of like sudden energy shifts around like fighting against oppression that all have dissipated. But I think we're going to see a lot of that coming forward in this next transition of Saturn in Aries. Okay. Whew, yeah. So, and then also obviously both of those times there was war happening, like worldwide, right? Like there's always some war happening, but during those times it was really highlighted of different occupations and different things that were happening. And then the time before that, that Saturn was in Aries was 1938 to 1940. So another huge time of the Great Depression was around that time, and that was the time like we were slowly like coming out of that. And I think that there was a lot of like newer ideas and newer ways of doing things that created a pathway forward that came out of Saturn and Aries. So now let's talk about if you have Saturn and Aries. So if you were born between the years of all of those times that I just mentioned, but I'm going to say them again, 1938 to 1940, 1967 to 1969, and 1996 to 1999. All, of course, keeping in mind that there were probably periods where it would dip out. But for the most part, during those times, you have Saturn in Aries. What does this mean? Having Saturn in Aries, anytime Saturn's in a sign, it's actually going to like somewhat repress those energies within you. So even though you would think that being born with Saturn in Aries would make you really powerful, it would. But there is this energy with Saturn and Aries where that takes time, that takes energy, that takes lessons. And some of that comes from not feeling powerful, having, older people in your life when you were younger that were really powerful and really scary that made you feel like you couldn't be that for whatever reason. Saturn and Aries also struggle with putting themselves first. It can be an issue for them, and it takes a lot more time in their life to gain those things. Having Saturn and Aries obviously depends on a lot of other things in your chart and where this is in your chart. But having Saturn and Aries means there could have been some type of responsibility on you as a young child that wasn't allowing you to have that inner spark or inner base energy of being childlike. And so that can come later in life. You have to like kind of work towards learning how to play and be youthful and have that spark and like let things come and go easily. Having Saturn in Aries is really interesting energy to work with because Saturn is in its fall. So it does take more time and more energy and more transits of it to understand it. And one of the things to keep in mind with Saturn is that it's not just about our Saturn return. We have, yes, a Saturn return, but before that happens, every 7 to 8 years, we have this relationship with Saturn where it creates either a square, an opposition, or another square, or a return. And so we can start to understand our Saturn by working with these 7 to 8 year cycles. So if you have Saturn in Aries, when Saturn is in Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, you're going to be working with that energy as well. And the same to be said if you don't have Saturn in Aries, but you have Saturn in Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, you are going through either a Saturn square or a Saturn opposition when Saturn is in Aries. And yeah, I think that the Saturn squares are more difficult than the Saturn opposition and the Saturn return. I think the squares are like really confusing energies to work with and puts a lot of pressure on you. So understanding the Saturn return is important, but also it's important to understand these other cycles that we go through with Saturn that all have meaning. And the Saturn squares, I feel like, are the most challenging. So if you have Saturn in Cancer or Capricorn, you're in a Saturn square with Saturn in Aries, and that's probably more intense than a Saturn return in Aries. But who am I to say? It all depends on your chart and a lot of different things. But if you have Saturn in Aries, you are going through your Saturn return, and I think it's a lot better than going through a square. So now we are going to move into the house by house. One thing to keep in mind, I don't do based on your rising. I'm just so not like a whole sign person, a whole sign astrologer. I really believe it looking at where Aries is in your chart. Is it in the first house? Is it on the cusp of your ninth house, maybe it occupies your ninth and your 10th house. Look at where Saturn in Aries is happening for you. How do you find this out? You go to astro.com, you look up your chart, and you look for Aries. The Aries symbol it'll show you is that first sign in the zodiac that looks like a ram, kind of looks like my wings back here, actually. Um, and see what house number it's next to or what house numbers it's next to. So as I go through this house system, I'm talking about Saturn moving through that house for you and the specific energies of it being in Aries, okay? So let's start with the first house. I do want to say I pulled a card for each, which I really love doing. I don't always use the Zen Tarot for this, but I definitely felt called to use the Zen Tarot for this. And don't be alarmed, okay, because when I'm going through each one of the houses, I'm going to show you the card. Don't be alarmed by the card. There is no good or bad. There is no good or bad card. There is no good or bad house. There is no good or bad. It is just showing us the energy. And really, I feel like it's showing me the energy because I'm translating the energy. And so I ask it to show me the card that's going to best describe for people what this energy might be like to have it moving through there. Does that make sense? Thanks. Okay. So we're starting with the first house. The first house card is the Thunderbolt. Now, this is like the Tower card in Tarot. However, this is very different because we see fire, we see flames, we see this is such more of a fiery energy. And you know what I think of? I think of energy in the base chakra. I think of energy coming down as downloads. I think of a huge transformation for having Saturn in Aries for these next couple years that you're going to be like unrecognizable from the human that you are now to where you're going to be at the end of this transit. And it's all about yourself. It is all about your identity, how you relate to yourself, who you feel like you are, how much you feel like you're at home, how much you feel connected to the astral realm or source energy or nature or whatever you like to call it. This energy of having Saturn in Aries in your first house is about redeveloping your identity and your style and the way that you present yourself. So it's a really exciting time and a really exciting time to look at your whole chart. So maybe it's a good time to dive into that. Okay, if you have Saturn in Aries in the second house, so if your house is uh is Aries for the second house, you are in a flowering energy. This is very much like the water nymph energy. There's a glare. Okay, a little better. So this to me represents a lot of different things. I see I have to like do the arms that she's doing. I don't know why, but this is about allowing new things to come in, allowing yourself to receive, slowing down your pace. Saturn moving through your second house is going to slow you down. It's going to make you really sit with things in a different way. And there's this way in which you're developing, like maybe in the past you've had to have really strong boundaries, and that in some way has like pushed people away or not allowed things to come to you very easily. And during this transit, it's really an opportunity to allow things in, allow yourself to play with a new type of energy where you can receive, where you can steep in something new and not let it become your whole identity, but just be with it for a little bit. To me, this really represents like connecting with nature around you, that this is a really rich time to be in your garden or start a garden or start gardening or just start being in nature, spending time in nature. So that's the second house. When I think of Saturn in Aries in your second house, I think of um, just a really rich opportunity to re-spark your passions and your desires and your values, and just like really paying attention to what feels new and fresh for you around that and how to mm, just be with that without judgment. Okay, Saturn moving through your third house. Saturn in Aries moving through your third house. has to do with your consciousness. To me, this represents, there's this stoic figure, right? And it's for me, this is about like tuning into that ancient part of yourself, like your highest self, this part of you that has been through many different things, either in this life, in other lives, in just existence, and really tuning into where you're being asked to be aware of something else, where you're being asked to bring consciousness to a space, a place, your writing, your communication, because third house rules communication. To me, this really has to do with like reworking, like I think of editing, editing a book or something. It's like not the most fun work, but sometimes we have to go back and rework it and bring consciousness to something that we already feel like should be done in order to really strengthen it and really give it the bones it needs, really give it the justice that it needs. And so even if it's not a literal writing that you're editing, where are you needing to edit the way in which you communicate? Where are you needing to rework, be with the way that you connect to your community, your siblings, your closest people? And can you allow yourself to show up different and experience something different? Because I think if you do, it's going to be pretty amazing. Okay, fourth house. If you have Saturn in your fourth house, well, Saturn in Aries moving through your fourth house, you are moving beyond illusion, beyond illusions, beyond illusion. Beautiful butterfly energy here. To me, this speaks of a lot of levity within working with your family system. So wherever you came from, your foundation, this is the fourth house, and Saturn in Aries brings this levity to the situation. I think of like different therapies like EMDR that like lightens some heavy work that needs to happen. There's this way in which this is just an opportune time for you to go back and rework something from your childhood in a way that's not going to be as heavy as it would have been during other times, or it would have been if you tried to do it at other times. So I think this is just really bringing a lot of levity to situations, and specifically having to do with your foundation and where you come from. Having tough conversations with people in your life around your foundation, maybe around the family that you're wanting to create now, and or that you're already in, that maybe you have children, or maybe you want to have children. It's like really seeing beyond the illusions that you thought were true when you were younger, or what you made meaning of, like, because of this, I believe that, and like untangling those things to be able to see where you've been holding yourself back from having the foundation you want, or having the family you want, or having the relationships in family that you want, because you've tangled up too much. And now is the time to like untangle that and fly free with those butterfly wings. Yeah. Okay. The fifth house, Saturn and Aries in the fifth house. The fifth house is about creativity. And if you have Aries in your fifth house, that's cool. Like, that's really cool, because Aries is the fire, and that's a fire house, is Leo's house. So, you have a lot of creativity. You have a lot of ideas and sudden urges to make things or do things. And that creativity is amazing. And this is the time to work with that. And one of the ways to work with that is through experiencing and just like being with the creativity and being with um, yourself in a new way. I'll fall over here. Being with yourself in a new way around your creativity, around these ideas, and not needing to like necessarily have it be something that you create and put out into the world. It can just be something that's just for you to experience. And when I think of Saturn and Aries moving through your fifth house, it's like, yeah, I think of like just allowing yourself to like be the art. When Saturn is moving through here, it's like, can you just take something that you typically tend to give to everyone else, and can you just like allow yourself to experience that? And there can also be this, because fifth house also has to do with like passion and romance. It can also be like, let yourself fully experience a new type of relationship, or a new way of relating to another person that's very like, uh, new and fresh and feels different, and like do it without having a lot of judgment of yourself, or just seeing how things feel and just experimenting. So I think it's a really great opportunity to play with that. Okay, the sixth house card. Actually, oh yeah. Okay, so the sixth house card, I actually asked for another one, and I had a feeling when I asked for another card that I was going to get the card that I got because I knew what it was telling me, but I wanted to not freak you guys out. Okay, so this, the sixth house, if you have Saturn moving through there, I got the schizophrenia card, but if you'll notice, like if we could just cover that up, um, if you'll just notice, like, look at this person. They're like straddling two different things, and that's causing like it's causing a lot for this person, I'm sure. But it's like trying to like hold it all together. And there's a lot with this card of like overthinking and overplaying situations and trying to hold on to the old reality while moving into the new reality. So I asked for another card, and I knew I was going to get this card because I love this card, and it was about trust. And it's like, let go, let go, let God. It's like, no, you don't need to hold on. You really don't. You just fall. And when you fall, it's really scary. You have to trust that you're going to land in a place that is better suited for you. But in order to trust fall, you have to let go. And so this is a time for you to look at what you've been holding on to rigidly. um, Sixth house in general has to do with our health, our well-being, maintenance, routines, the ways in which we care for our beings, so our pets, ourselves, and our health. And so when I look at these cards, this to me really represents like the mind, and where you can cause suffering for yourself or lack of health for yourself by anxiety, fear, replaying scenarios, thinking about the future too much, and really learning how to trust and be with what is and let go of the rest. So that's the sixth house. Moving into the seventh house, which, Saturn in Aries in the seventh house is an interesting place to have Aries because it is typically, it's the energy of Libra in the seventh house. And because of that, it has to do with partnership and relationship. But Aries is very much about ourself. So it's an interesting place to have Aries energy, and because of that, with this transit, you're going to need a lot of courage. And so you got the courage card, and one of the things I love about this is like the plant is growing in the cement in a place where it's hostile, and I kind of think of having Aries in the seventh house a little bit like that, like it's a little bit edgy. And so this opportunity with Saturn there is to like really um, confront some things, really have courage, and also there's another word that I'm like it's almost there. Um, yeah, I mean confrontation, courage, and in a way it's like oh, this is going to drive me crazy that the word is not coming to me. But in a way, it's like a test of sorts. And I think that's something of the word that was going to be coming in. But it's testing not only you, it's testing the people around you to allow them to see you in new eyes. Like allowing yourself to be seen in new eyes and not think you know what people are thinking about you or how they're perceiving you. But also, in a way, it's testing the people around you if they're willing and able to see you with new eyes. And personally, being a human for as long as I have, I've definitely had this experience where people can't. They have too many projections of you, they have too many ideas, or they put you on a pedestal, or they put you not on a pedestal, whatever the opposite of that is, in a pit. And they can't see this other version of you or this other way of being. And I related this all of Saturn and Aries about going back and doing the base work. And for you, this might mirror in a way the ways in which you felt judged by your parents, or especially your father, or figures in your life, or teachers, where you didn't feel like they gave you space to shine, to be who you were. And so this is a really great time to like rework that and rework those ideals. And I would say that's another great place for working with me um, placement because it's like big work that you're going to be doing in these next 2 years. Moving into the eighth house, the card for the eighth house was the dream. Now, this looks like a really lovely card. See, this is why it's like for me, not just like based on the card, but like how I translate it. I know the meaning of this card, and the meaning of this card is when we like over project. I was just talking about with the seventh house projections. This is when we over project, like we're looking for someone to save us. And this time frame of Saturn and Aries is about being your own hero and doing your own work and kind of waking from that dream that someone's going to save you or that someone's going to come in and take away all of your whatever problems, um, and provide whatever you can't provide for yourself, right? And this goes back to I was talking about attachment earlier in a different post, and you know, when we're attached to the dream, when we're too attached to the dream, it actually can't actualize. So it doesn't necessarily mean that someone won't come in that in some way provides for you. It just means you can't be attached to that's the way it's got to be, or else you're going to be unhappy. You have to take care of yourself. You have to provide for yourself and love yourself and be okay in whatever circumstance. So, working with Saturn and moving through your eighth house is a lot having to do with your fears and fears of going without or fears of not connecting and confronting those and like really getting to the root of what's in that fear and what have you been kind of subconsciously blocking because you're too attached to it being one way or you're too attached to it looking one way. Big stuff. Okay. So Saturn moving through your ninth house, Saturn and Aries moving through your ninth house. Ooh, playfulness. I love this card. As you can see, they're very light. It's a lot of levity in this card. The ninth house rules travel, it rules expansion. It's Jupiter's arena of expansion, travel, expanding the mind. It can have to do with higher education. It can also have to do with teaching. So with Saturn and Aries, it might be an exploration of something that you want to teach, something that you want to share, something that you want to learn, somewhere you want to travel, and creating the discipline to make it happen. Now, with this card, I don't see a lot of discipline. I see a clown, which, is slightly alarming, but I think that to me, what this represents is like Saturn in the ninth house doesn't have to be like the strict thing or limiting travel or limiting education. It's almost like the way you go about it, it has to have a little bit of playfulness and a little bit of spark to it to make it happen during this time. There has to be this like, yeah, this very like easeful way in which you go about things these next couple of years. And wouldn't we want it that way? Like, I wouldn't want it any other way, but it's so easy to forget that. It's so easy to make things heavy or hard, or I don't know. Like, one of the things I'll do is I'll like play out all the options and I'll think of all like the worst things that I'll have to do or deal with in those options. And like, that's not fun. That's not light. That's not playful. So when you're thinking about, yeah, like higher education or traveling, thinking about like the lightest way to make it happen, the most magical way to make it happen, and then just go after it. Okay. Saturn moving through your 10th house. Now, again, this is one of those cards. Try not to have judgment around if this is your card. The miser. Okay. The miser card to me represents isolation and isolation coming from, if you think about Saturn in the 10th house, isolation coming from thinking that you have to be the one. You have to be the one to do all the things, to make it all happen. You have to make yourself proud. You have to work harder. You have to like gather. You have to like accumulate. You have to like in this material world, like make a certain amount or do a certain thing because the 10th house has to do with our vocation and our work in the world. And it's really connected into this material accumulation. So I think this is like a perfect card for Saturn being there and Saturn showing you a different way. Saturn being like, hey, like I noticed that your back's turned towards like your community or your family or your people or God. And Saturn is like, how can I turn you towards the right things or the things that matter the most? And in this time, that might come about in ways that don't feel super comfortable, but are very necessary. So being open to the ways in which you're being made to see things different and do things different, and looking at your early beliefs around vocation, around work in the world, because that inner child within you likely has things to say about how they wanted it to go or what they wanted to feel and experience in their work in the world before there was a lot of fear, before there was a lot of pressure, before there was a lot of materialism put on it. Okay, we are down to the last two houses. 11th house. 11th house got the harmony card. I love this card as well. If you can see, there's very much a connection between the mind and the third eye and the heart and this dolphin energy. The dolphins, um, that it's like this new way of communicating. And the 11th house is your extended community. It's like social media. It's like the future. It's like your branding, like all of those things. And so this way in which this new way of communicating and bringing things forward in this easeful way, but that doesn't always come from ease. That sometimes comes from being really frustrated, being really annoyed, being really irked around certain things, and having to process and having to learn new ways of communicating, learn new ways of branding, learn new ways of doing things. Um, and from those lessons, we find the harmony. So I see this as a time for you to like learn some new ways, but also like, yeah, just try different ways of doing things with Saturn in the 11th house and new ways of connecting because they're out there and it's like, it's not always what like everyone else is doing. There's some like really unique things with Saturn in the 11th house during this transit that you need to tap into for yourself that require like this connection to your higher self. And one of the ways that you can do that is through um, finding things that put you in the flow state. Like this to me is such a flow state. And so it's like, maybe it's not sitting and meditating. Maybe it's like playing music, or maybe it's going for a walk in nature. Maybe it's painting, like finding your flow state thing, and likely you're going to get some good information coming in. Okay. Saturn in the 12th house in Aries during this transit is about 6 times. Like, look at this. I feel like we've had a lot of cards with like the arms open. It's like this one is like arms open, head up to the sky. Like, really, to me, the 12th house is like our connection to source energy. If you see, like, the earth is below and they're just like up to the heavens and this like confetti's falling. There's such like pride in this in like a healthy way. And the tiger is like pride as well. And there's some like hard earned things that are going to come through during these next 2.5 years for you. And it's really important to celebrate your successes. It's really important to honor how far you've come. And it's really important during this time to connect in with source energy and find different ways to connect with source energy and really take the time and space to deconnect from the World Wide Web and be with source energy and like be there for yourself and celebrate your wins, especially because with Aries in the 12th house, your whole life, maybe you felt like your wins haven't been celebrated, that you've had to like create your own celebrations or that you've had to like pat yourself on the back. And it's really important to continue to do that and to also invite other people in to help you celebrate things. Yeah. And then the overall card that I pulled for everyone that I said earlier, but I didn't show you, is the intensity card. So Saturn in Aries is going to be an intense cycle. Buckle up, and we're all in for the ride, and we all have free will. So remember your free will as you're moving forward into this energy. Remember your free will in not just how you interact in the world and what you take part in, but also your free will in what pictures you fall into around doom and gloom or what pictures you fall into around anxiety, and using your free will to cultivate like a healthier mental practice, because a lot with Saturn and Aries has to do with our mental state. And we really want to take care of that in these next couple of years. So checking yourself around social media, checking yourself around how much time you're spending on screens, and really take good care of yourself during this next couple years, because it is going to be an intense cycle. If you want to work with me, you can do that. You can book with me through the link in my profile. And next month, around the solstice, I will have the video. I think it'll be around the solstice for Jupiter in Cancer. So tune in for that. If you don't already like and follow, please do that and leave a comment. Let me know, where is this happening for you? And did this resonate for you?